Recently I had a revelation. I was just sitting back and thinking, all of my horror art friends started off by drawing Goosebumps and went to slashers and creepypasta, but I kind of did the opposite. When I was a kid, I was like a huge creepypasta girly, but like I didn't read any of the stories. I did a little, but I would just listen to like the AMVs with all the uncredited art. I'd listen to like Mr. Creepypasta a lot because he had a great spooky reading voice. Of course I would make fan art, but I'm unwilling to show that because it is so ugly. Give me credit, I was in middle school. So I decided in my adult age that I would sit down and read the original stories, not any reboots, none of that, of 15 of my favorite characters that I can remember from my childhood. I have to be able to at least look at them and like recognize them. That's how they can count on this list. And I'm going to be making my own designs based on these stories. It'd probably give my own twist on these characters, because some of them, I think they should fit different vibes than their designs give off. And I'm also going to try and incorporate stuff that the fandom gave these characters, because I feel like with creepypasta art, a lot of it is fan-driven, and I kind of want to pay my respects to the community. I wanted to start off with my all-time favorite growing up, which was Laughing Jack. This character, like, paved the way for a bunch of my character trait interest. Like, I eat up characters who are, like, weird and lanky, have pointy noses, and I love clown characters. He definitely fits, like, a bunch of my brackets of being, like, a cool character design. And I do want to say, before we get into the meat of the story and this character, there is viewer discretion is advised, especially with, like, child murder, as well as torture. When I looked into drawing this character, I found the image and story were both created by this fella named Snuffbomb. Now, I knew absolutely nothing about this guy, and when I did the drawing, I included his picture in the reference because it was the first image, and I wanted to keep it original. And I had no idea that this dude was really creepy online, like, towards kids. And I do want to apologize, and I do want to give a warning to anyone who was affected by that, especially if they're in the creepypasta community. I've had people talk about how they've hated this character, and I always wondered why, and I probably should have asked and did more research before drawing it, because I wouldn't have included the picture. I do apologize for just not looking into that. For this, I did, like, completely redesign the character, and I think the community should reclaim it. He's ours now. From what I could find, the first story of Laughing Jack was made on March 3rd, 2013, with his origin story being released soon after on December 14th, also in 2013. The first story follows the story of a mother of a 5-year-old named James. Throughout this story, James discovers a new friend named Laughing Jack. James directly describes him as, he's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with stripy socks, and he always smiles. The mom chalks it up as her kid making up an imaginary friend and goes about her day. However, that night she has a nightmare where she's in some rundown amusement park, unable to escape while the song Pop Goes the Weasel plays. And this song ended up being iconic in the community. I remember every compilation video you'd watch, if it had Laughing Jack in it, it would probably have this Pop Goes the Weasel. It is synonymous with this character in the community. Getting back to the story, when the music stops, the lights turn on, and the mother is in the middle of a massacre of children before she jolts awake. This is a red herring for what's to come in this story. During the day, spooky shit starts happening. Toys get in her room when they shouldn't have. James is taking candy from strangers. Homie did not get shown the PSAs I did when I was a kid. And the mother is upset by this, because she's like, I didn't buy those candies. Where the hell did you get these from? She ends up going to bed early and, like, feeling bad for yelling at James. But she's reasonably concerned. I'd be a little freaked out, too, if my kid just showed up with candy I've never seen before. God knows what's in it. Unless it's Halloween. Then it makes sense. Now, unfortunately, the worst part of the story happens. Fido the dog, that I have not mentioned until now, is strung up in a gruesome display, and he's stuffed with the same candy. And what the fuck, dude? I can forgive children dying in horror movies, but if you turn goddamn pets into piñatas, I get upset. I liked Fido even though he was only mentioned once and was used for shock value. After this, the mother's reasonably upset. She calls the police, they do jack shit, and James has a nightmare and is like trembling and stuff. So she makes sure to hook up a baby monitor to make sure nothing happens to James in the night. However, this is a creepypasta story, so I'm sure you know what's going to happen. She can hear slight noises through the baby monitor before a cruel laugh. She grabs a knife and runs into the room before finding her son barely alive, strung up and mutilated. Before the mother has time to do anything, she is greeted by Laughing Jack, where she describes him as his ghost white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by dark rings. His twisted smile revealed a sharp row of jagged teeth, and his skin did not look like skin at all. It almost looked rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque, his long arms hanging down past his waist. The way he was poised almost made him look boneless, like a rag doll. Then after her description, he basically dances around her and she goes to stab him, but he poofs into a cloud of smoke and she accidentally hits her own son. The story ends, unhappily, with her stating her trial is soon. It's an extremely short story, and I have no idea how I found this stuff when I was 12. Reading it now as an adult, it really gives me early 2000s vibes with gore being on the rise. The writer kind of wanted to match that vibe that slasher reboots were getting at the time, because this was 2013, that was prime time. Slasher, gory reboots, let's see how crazy we can get. I did cut out all of the details, but when you read the story, it does get more graphic. I kind of just gave you guys the footnotes. It does, however, get way worse in part 2, especially with the gore. The second story gives me a different vibe. I think it's because it's also told in third person, when this one was strictly in first. And in the second, we learn about Laughing Jack's origin and his backstory, and kind of what's supposed to motivate him and how he became to be a creepy clown dude. In this one, we follow a young boy named Isaac in the 1800s. He's also poor. He can't afford to celebrate Christmas due to his abusive family dynamic. His mother is super strict and homeschools him, and his father, works and is an abusive drunk. On Christmas morning, Isaac awakes to a Laughing Jack in the box at the foot of his bed. Cranking it, it plays the classic Pop Goes the Weasel song before a clown pops out, proclaiming he is Isaac's best friend for life, who never gets tired of playing. In this story, Jack is introduced with the description of, as the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicolored clown man with bright red hair, a swirly, rainbow-colored cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat atop his raggedy and colorful clown outfit. This story is 10 times longer than the first, so I'm hoping I can speed through it so I have time to talk about my design choices, so this video isn't 20 minutes long. First, Isaac gets abused by his parents, and him and Jack play pirates where they accidentally kill the neighbor's cat. What the hell, man? His parents find out about the cat, assume Isaac did it, and we're like, he's crazy, he's blaming this clown that doesn't exist. And they send him to a boarding school. Parents of the year, hello. Jack goes back in his box where he's left alone from his best friend for life. After 13 years, Jack witnesses Isaac's father murder his mother in a drunken rage, foreshadowing again. And now a 20-year-old Isaac is left without any of his parents, and he never opens the box. And Jack gets pissed by that. He's very lonely. As all of his colors wash out and now he's monochrome and hollow. He's angry. Then one night, Isaac brings home a lady friend where he follows in his drunken father's footsteps and kills her because he can't take no for an answer. Turns out 13 years away from your best friend for life turns you into a violent incel. What the hell, Isaac? The internet doesn't even exist yet, dude. Give it a moment. However, this scene is to show Isaac and Jack getting their taste for violence. And Jack is just stuck in the box, so he's just watching. But Isaac starts acting like he's from the Sawyer clan from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and is turning people into furniture. And he makes this weird makeshift torture bed so he can just torture people. At this point in the story, it really becomes just descriptions of torture, which really isn't my cup of tea. I know this is a horror story, and in this area of content, it was mainly gore-based. I know in 2013, the Evil Dead reboot came out, as well as Green Inferno. For this video, I'm gonna not describe in great detail about the torture, just know it does go into paragraphs. I mean, half of this story, I shit you not, is abuse and torture. However, in these paragraphs, we do learn that Jack's personality changes based on what can please Isaac, because he was made for him. Even though the things that please Isaac are like torture, Jack's mind makes it like games. And one night, Isaac accidentally sets off the box, and of course, the song plays. And when it ends, the duo meets face to face for the first time in 13 years. We also get to see a new description of the character, which goes, "All the way across the room, by the garbage can, stood the nightmarish Laughing Jack. He was completely monochrome. His mangled black hair hung down in twisted locks. Sharp, jagged teeth decorated his twisted grin. His arms hung down like a rag doll, with his grotesque long fingers nearly scraping the floor. Then, with a bone-chilling, raspy voiced, fiendish clown spoke." That is a weird-ass sentence to add. And you know, Isaac is obviously like, holy shit, like, you're not a figment of my imagination. I'd probably kill you now. But of course, you can kind of guess where the story's going to end. Jack ends up, like, torturing Isaac, and it goes on for a super long time. By the end of it, he tells Isaac, "It's been a blast, kiddo, but it looks like our time together is about up. No need for tears, though, because I plan on spreading my friendship to all the lonely kids in the world." The story ends with cops finding his body on Christmas Eve. Looking back on these stories, I can totally understand why my mom wanted to ban me from Creepypasta after I told her about this one, because, you know, 12-year-old me was super smart. I really don't remember it being this violent, though. Maybe it's because I really liked the YouTube videos, and they were probably edited. I just don't remember, like, any of this. When I was reading it, I was like, holy shit, this character I was, like, obsessed with came from this? Like, I just blocked it all out of my memory. I only loosely remember Isaac, the weird bone furniture he would make, but nothing else. While I really like the concept and design of Laughing Jack, this story just really isn't my thing. I can see, like, gorehounds loving it because there is extreme violence in it, but for me, horror media needs to be at least a little silly for me to enjoy it, especially if there is heavy gore and blood. Like, take, for example, the Evil Dead series. Part 2 has, like, blood gushing everywhere, but it's so silly that it's just, you don't really see it as gory, you just see it as being weird. Horror to me is meant to be fun. It's meant to scare you, but when it's just pure descriptions of torture, it feels less from a fun internet horror story or slasher film to more of a snuff film, with the only reason you would read it is for pure torture. Now granted, I'm not the best at writing, so I don't really know if I'm qualified to review a story like this. I will say it's definitely not what I'm hoping for with Laughing Jack's design. Like I said, it's a great character concept. Having an imaginary friend that forms around your interest, you become a serial killer, that's a cool concept. I like that. But this story only really scraped that idea. It was just mainly descriptions of gore. I think it would have been more interesting if the characters were shown to be very silly and clown-like, but still playing into what Isaac considers a game, even if it's a sick one. Which he kinda does. He mainly just says kiddo, and that's his main silly thing. The story just kinda gives me edgier Terrifier vibes, but with the Terrifier series, the gore happens after you watch these characters like get up close and personal with this thing you know is a threat. So the whole time you're sitting there and the suspense builds with, holy shit, you need to like get away from this dude, because he's insane. And Terrifier also isn't my personal favorite thing. A lot of these scenes I can't sit through, because I get squeamish. But another thing with those series is that you also have a character to root for. This is a big thing with horror for me. I always feel like you need a character to root for, because if you only have the villain, you're rooting for someone to, like, torture other people. And in this case, he's, like, torturing children. So it's like, well, I don't know if I can root for this guy who's, like, murdering innocent children. But he's, like, the only character. At least with the first story, you had the mother. I just felt like this story was pure gore and abuse scenes, which can be used greatly in horror. I think the best example everyone uses is Saw, especially the first one. I'm not a fan of some of the later movies, but the first one, there is blood, but, like, the torture only really happens in a couple of scenes. Because the whole time these dudes are just sitting in this room, and you jump from characters to characters to see how they made it to that moment. And it builds up that nice suspense of, like, holy shit, like, are they going to become erratic? Like, what's going to happen? And that's where a lot of the horror comes from. It's not the torture, though. That's not where it comes from. Like, yes, the torture adds to it, and that's, like, the main problem. It's not, like, the main source of fear. With this story, like, there was so much torture that by the end of the graphic scenes, he just started, like, listing people. And I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to read that again. But it just felt, like, edgy to me, and it just isn't very nice. It feels like it was glorifying torture instead of vilifying it, if that makes sense. But now we get to the fun part. I'm finally going to talk about my design ideas for this character and, like, what changes I would make. I know the speed paint has been playing in the background, but now it's time for me to actually talk about that stuff. My big inspiration for this character were Jack-in-the-Boxes themselves. I know, crazy. But I always felt like the main design the community used never really gave me Jack-in-the-Box vibes, or something that would be given to a lonely child, like a living toy. And I don't want to sound like I'm hating on this design. I know a lot of people love it a lot, but for me it just doesn't fit the imaginary friend vibe who came out of a Jack-in-the-Box. And this is my own design. You guys are welcome to use it, and you're welcome to use it with the original version. Go wild. Another big thing I wanted to focus on was him looking friendlier looking, even after he turned gray. He is a character that children see as friendly, and I have the same philosophy with puppet characters. I'm a very big fan of dolls and horror, and a lot of movies, they'll make them look scary as shit, and it's like, no kid would go up to that. So if you have a character like this, they have to be at least a little friendly looking, and the lighting and environment should make them look scary in certain scenes. For example, I draw Slappy a lot, and when I made his book design, I was like, well, he's kind of got to look friendly because all of these kids are just picking up this doll. If he's scary as shit looking, no kid is going to pick him up. It's a detail I think is very important with characters like these. So when designing my own Laughing Jack, I know I wanted him to look pretty fluffy and friendly-ish looking, while still maintaining that weird clown vibe. I took a lot of inspo from this movie called Jack-in-the-Box. It's free on Tubi if you'd like to watch it, and the main character can be seen on the references on the side. In this movie, Jack-in-the-Boxes are these demonic creatures that are stuck in this box. They can grant you wishes if you feed them, but they're very goat-like in their lower half, so I kind of wanted to take that with Laughing Jack, because I knew it would sell that fluffy, weird, imaginary creature vibe. I also added a tail, because I can't help myself when it comes to animal-like creatures. I added a tail bell too, because I thought that would be scary to hear in the dark alone, not because it's one of my favorite design ideas for clowns with tails. I'm a creature of habit, I really can't help myself when it comes to certain things. Another big want with this design was to incorporate the Jack-in-the-Box springs, especially the torso part. So what I did is I took away the bandages wrapping around the character and replaced it with these like long springy arms, kind of like the clown from Krampus. I also changed the arms to have the springs as well. I figured since his arms are so lanky that him having like normal arms would just look so weird, and if he's already kind of toyish looking, the springs on the arms would help sell that he is more of a toy than he is a living creature. Another big change I made was the feathers. I know in the story they were described on top of the clown outfit, but I figured since he's already a toy and so animal-like, that the feathers could be a part of his body and sticking out through the clothing. After I nailed down the line art, I decided to do the older version of him first, where he's all colorful. I figured if I nailed down the colors, I wouldn't really have to focus as much on the monochrome version, because the color contrast should already be there with his colorful palette. I wanted his main colors to be red, since that was the one mentioned in the story, instead of just rainbows. And I made sure his clothing would contrast that well, so I used a very desaturated blue or purple to help make the bright reds pop more. And when doing his skin, I wanted to make like it was almost painted, kind of a nod to him being a Jack-in-the-Box, and the mother from the first story stating that his skin looked faked. I did this by making his cheeks super rosy in contrast with his pale skin, almost like those old rubber dolls they had. A big change I made was his clothing. I decided to keep both versions pretty dark, just so the colors of his body would pop more. I do think I could have maybe made it a little less gray and more bright, but I think if I were to draw this character again, maybe I could just add colorful patches onto his pants instead of making the pants brighter. Also, towards the end of the story, I forgot he was supposed to be wearing socks, so I kind of gave him more ankle warmers. And I really like this idea. It helps break up this big patch of gray that he has in the middle of his body compared to the very colorful limbs. Finally, going on to the dark version, I only changed a couple of things. The big change were like the stripes on his arms and torso, because when I switched it with the color filter, they had like 4 different color contrasts, and I kind of just wanted to stick with 2. I also changed the eyes to look more faithful to the story instead of the red, yellow, and blue ones I gave with his normal design. And with that, we're done. We have Laughing Jack, GloomyTeeth edition. I had a lot of fun designing this character. It's always a treat to be able to design a clown, especially if it's one that I loved so much as a kid. Like I said earlier, he has a lot of traits that I love now as an adult. I'll put a couple of pictures here. But I realized when designing this character, he looks exactly like some of my characters, so I think I'm just repetitive. I think with this design, he fits the imaginary creature vibe a lot more, and I could see this thing popping out of a Laughing Jack in the box. But if you'd like, you're welcome to tell me your thoughts. What would you like to change about this character? Maybe you grew up with him too and had different ideas. I'm all ears to hearing what you guys have to say, and I plan on continuing this series. So if you'd like to stick around for that and my weird puppet obsession, you're welcome to subscribe. You're able to unsubscribe whenever you'd like. That's all. Enjoy the rest of your guys' day. And remember, if your kid shows up with weird candy you don't recognize, assume it's a clown. 'Cause then your dog may become a piñata.